And we are live, folks. Welcome to episode number 22. I want to say it was really great to have Sam Shuford of WOTH, or Women of the Hobby, and also known as Sam Stuff 25, on our show last week. Sam is a young and inspiring female voice for the hobby. With her WOTH show, this young lady has created an online community forum of women collectors where she showcases other female collectors in the hobby. Please be sure to follow and subscribe to Sam's channel. Just like Christina at Card Ladder, Hannah at She Collects Cards, and others, Sam is another bright light who is empowering female collectors and bringing positive change to the hobby community.
So for tonight's guest, what can we say that hasn't already been said? For those of you in the hockey collectibles vintage circles know this man very well. He always has an interesting story to tell, and he has a warm voice, so it makes for easy listening. He's a well-storied historian and has contributed to a vast number of publications, articles, and various pieces of subject matter on the vintage hockey collectible circuit. People will seek out his knowledge and wealth of knowledge, I might add, just to understand a piece of history that would have been otherwise lost. And did I say he has a warm and inviting voice? Well, we'll find out now. We'll bring him on board. His name is Bobby Burrell.
Good evening.
Hey, Bobby.
Hey.
How are we?
I'm good. Good. How are you?
I'm great. How you doing, Kent? How you doing, Amy?
Good.
Can't complain.
Wonderful.
So we tried really hard to come up with a different snapshot of the Bobby that is well known on several channels, such as Carlos's Because I'm Carlos and the interview you did with Jeremy. And I'm sure you've done other pieces as well, plus your written print, so people have seen what you've written. I want to know a snapshot of Bobby Burrell as a child, growing up in the hobby. What did he collect? What was he like? What made him happy?
Well, Bobby Burrell, he lived to play and watch hockey. I think you have to say that. Every kid around my neighborhood, we were all into hockey. We would look forward to getting new sticks or new hockey equipment for Christmas. Actually, the biggest thing was a net. And that's one of the biggest things we ever got was a hockey net, because you always put, two shoes down or a couple jackets. So once we got a net, we were official. And that's kind of what led to me being into hockey all the time. We always kept playing, we kept doing stuff, and then we started opening cards. On our walk to school, we would stop at the dairy. It was open early, and there's a great picture. It's that's 1975 when Jaws came out, and I got new hockey gloves. So hockey has surrounded my life, like most Canadians. I played hockey, I watched hockey, I was a dedicated Leaf fan for so many years. And, growing up, if you got a new piece of equipment, you were happy for Christmas. You didn't care about anything else. It didn't matter. Toys and games, of course. I came from a separated family early on, so there's a wonderful shot. There we go. This is 1970. 70-71. So in that bag is 70-71 cards that I'm going to trade with my friend Gerard there. And that's what we did. We had best friends right across the street. You bring your cards, you sit down, you trade, and get all the cards that you wanted to get.
So were you a Leafs fan growing up? What team did you follow?
Yeah, I was a Leaf fan, 100%. Most of my heritage, because I'm half French and half Scottish, my grandfather was, he tried out for the Leafs, but he was a Canadiens fan. He was instrumental in showing me hockey, the things that went on and what he did and what have you. And it was all in the family. It was really in the family. Even going back many years, we can say that Richard and Bellevaux are actually in my family tree to a sort. So, which is kind of interesting. I was a very good hockey player. I was the worst player, actually, when I first started, because I didn't know how to skate. I was about 7 years old. We never skated. We played ball hockey all the time, but we never skated. And I would practice on the outside rink of the arena that I joined. And if the goalie got a penalty, I would go in the penalty box. That's how bad of a player I was. And every day, I was so determined every day to skate around the rink to get better and better. The next year, I got on the All-Star team, and I became the fastest skater in the league for the next 10 years.
Awesome. And before we go into other questions and get a little more, get to know Bobby a little more, I want to say hi to Yannick, Good evening to you. Thanks for hanging out with us at the virtual expo with Bobby and myself and Kent. Darcy, thanks for tuning in. Appreciate you coming as well. Dennis is always here at every show, so I appreciate it as well. And then we have David G. Haven't met David before on the show, but appreciate you coming up to check us out. So much appreciated. So, Bobby, like you gave us a good snapshot of you as a child. So I want to see and this has been a fun question we've asked a lot of people on the show. We asked Brian Price, and we're going to ask a couple other people along the way, and Jeremy as well. Is like as you mature and you leave your toddler years and go into becoming a young adult or adulthood, what portion of a hobby stuck with you, and what did you end up throwing away that you no longer felt was good enough for you for the hobby, and what did you keep in terms of your approach to the hobby?
I guess the hobby wasn't really sort of a thing at that time. It was what you were just into, growing up and going into an adult. So I would have to say at that time, I was definitely into motorcycles and girls more than I was into hockey cards and what have you. So that kind of took a back seat. But I guess a little bit of history is I started collecting hockey cards, and then I got into the 1971 Toronto Sun photos. They were a little different. I was always a little different. I never wanted to collect what everybody else collected. I always wanted to be a little different. And those Toronto Sun photos put me in another sort of league. So I kind of like collecting those. And then I got into comic books, and I moved on into there. Once I graduated high school, I just went into the working world, and I started driving motorcycles. And, we had some fun drinking, going out on dates, going to movies, that kind of stuff. So the hobby really took a backseat. I wasn't the type of person that kind of went right through. I would just keep going with what was going on at that time. And it was, girls and having fun.
So that's common with many people we've talked to along the while. Actually, I believe Jeremy stayed at it. He mentioned it was only a year hiatus. I definitely took a hiatus for the same reasons. Well, no motorcycles, but just girls and other extracurricular activities, playing hockey as well.
Yes.
So one thing that you're well known for is being a vintage hockey collectibles historian. So quite often, for example, at the virtual expo, we had you on, right?
Yes.
And you were talking about history, and on many channels that you've been on, you talk about the history. And even when I'm having a chat with someone like Name, we were talking about something like the origin of the sport of hockey, and you mentioned, I think it was Banty. Then you showed, hey, check this out. Show him this poster or this collectible, and you have always a lot of pictures and a lot of wealth of material. So, what started you down the path of being a historian, and what brought you to that? It's not a career choice; it's a hobby choice.
Yeah, it's definitely a hobby choice. I would have to say the one word is osmosis. I after I bought a condo, I was working in sales, I did all these things, and then I had a little bit of time and money to relax, and I started to look. The internet just started, 96, 97, 98, and I got into eBay, and I started looking around, going, "Wow, there's some great stuff here. Wow." From when I was a kid, that's amazing. And the flush of, recapturing your youth was just right there. And I just went, wow, I gotta buy something. I just have to have it, because we have to covet back what we lost over the years, and we moved a lot as a kid. Going back to the other question, we moved a lot as a kid. So we would lose a little bit of our collection every time we moved. Your mom would say, do you need this still? No, it's okay. Don't worry about it. There's no nostalgia in today. And when you're in that today, you don't care. Looking back, obviously you go, damn, I wish I would have kept all my cards. I wish I would have kept all this other stuff, unfortunately. So, so moving forward, I guess I just kept going with the hockey collectibles after I saw eBay, and I never really stopped. But the one thing that really bothered me was some dates weren't on things. They, I would see somebody list something as 1965 and another person listed in 1967. And I've always been the inquiring mind. As my mom used to say, she goes, you always ask so many questions about things, what's under the sink? What is that? What if I drink it? What would happen? I always wanted to know the end result of things. And so I've always had that inquiring mind. And it's actually the osmosis part would just it took me on a journey of being a historian. I didn't plan on being a historian. It's not like you say, this is what I want to do with my life. It just kind of happened over time. And that's what happened with me.
I'm going to go on a bit of a segue here because I just thought of an idea around a question for you. So you mentioned you're very tight. Your family's very tight, right? You're very close with your fathers and relatives and whatnot. And I'm assuming that you probably were very close to your grandparents if you were around. And did you ever find yourself kind of captivated by listening to their stories of their past during your youth? Like, did that ever kind of get like you sit down and you're like, oh, tell me more, tell me more? Did you ever find yourself doing that?
Surprisingly enough, that is true, because I did listen to them, and I always enjoyed the stories. Now, understand that in school, I got 55 in history. I didn't care. I didn't like history. I was more of a math person. I was facts, and I really enjoyed that part of it. And who would understand that you'd be a historian later on in life? I would have never predicted it. And I loved listening to my grandfather's stories, my mom's stories, my brother's stories, everybody's stories. That they had little stuff that they did in their lives that maybe I didn't know about, or what have you. And it was really exciting for me to hear that stuff. I was always waiting with bated breath when somebody would tell me a story, because I was always willing to learn. I was very much of a sponge.
Yeah. I actually, it's funny you mention that, because one of the things I loved to do as a child was I used to soak up information from those who are older around. Like, I'm much older. For example, my grandfathers, I remember their stories, my grandmothers, and I would often I'd watch, for example, I'm a huge World War II, World War I. I love that stuff, right? When I'm watching the movies and history and the documentaries, I think of the stories they've told me, right? I'm like, wow, like, what are the parallels there? So one of the things that when you were documenting your vintage collectibles, do you ever think anything that some of the stories that your relatives tell you kind of pop in? You're like, oh, that was around that time. It's interesting that these are around the same period.
Yeah, everything's kind of relative, because if they would tell you a story, do you remember the packs on the shelves? Do you remember anything like that? Do you have any pictures? It was, always 100 questions, because they would tell you interesting stuff. And when my grandfather passed away, he had a trunk full of old programs and 3940 Peachy. But with the hockey cards, there was also there was 20 hockey cards, and those are the large 5x7 hockey cards. He also had movie star cards, which was a key for me for figuring out that they were both issued at the same time. Okay. So when the display box was found, that led me to going, that's great. I know exactly how it was issued. We know how it was done. And it solved a big mystery for me, because mysteries are everything for me. I'm very excited to learn new information all the time. And that's why I guess I'm considered the hobby sponge.
Bobby, Bobby, do you get excited when you find out and learn about new things that you didn't know, like even today?
Like a 10-year-old girl, yes.
Exactly. Cool.
Pretty close. It's sort of the bane of my existence is to find what's new. What's the next piece of the puzzle? What's going to come around the corner? I'm always excited. I don't like a predictable future, which a person of my personality type would probably more enjoy. But I love the randomness of the stuff that comes out. And I love figuring things out. I really like working them out. And I guess I turned out okay at it.
Do you share this love of historical recollection with any of your siblings? Like, is it a common thing, or are you kind of like an outlier?
Well, it's interesting. My sister, it's kind of funny. When it seems like when you turn a certain age, you get a little bit of nostalgia. And then you start remembering this stuff, and then they start to appreciate it more. When they're younger, they don't really care, right? Yeah. Everybody's kind of living their life in their 20s. But once they hit 30, 35, 40, then they start going, hey, I remember that. Oh, that was so cool. Exactly. So now you know how I feel about the stuff that I have, or the stuff that I pursue. And then she goes, well, who did that? Or who issued that? Or what? She was in a Holly hobby. And I remember standing in line for my sister back in 1980. I think it was 82 or 83 when the Cabbage Patch dolls came out. It's really an interesting story, because there was a mall entrance, and then it was a Kmart. There was a mall entrance and outside entrance. So I stood in line. I was in the Cabbage Patch thing for my sister, because I'm 20 something at that time. And all of a sudden, it's calm, relaxed. But they opened the doors to the mall, and people started running across, and we're all walking in kind of normal, and then we're seeing those people run across. We're going, "Hey, we better get there." So we went Cabbage Patch diving. It was just like Cabbage Patches were flying everywhere. So it's kind of funny to be in that era of that time period, and that's what happened. I think right from about the 80s, that's when things started to really move with collectibles. You know, as cards started to get away from kids and price guides and everything started to come in around that time period, and the market started to shift away from kids chewing bubblegum and throwing cards against the wall to, hey, keep these cards nice, put them in a sleeve, put them in something, preserve them.
Interesting. First of all, I want to say hi to Jeff McMahon. So Jeff McMahon, thanks for coming to the show to watch. And I don't know who this guy is. I think his name's Jeremy. He might be around Sports Cards Live, maybe. Might know him. We might know him. Thanks for tuning in, buddy.
Yeah.
So, it's interesting. I know that when we did the show prior to, not the show prior, but we met earlier to see what questions we would ask. And
sure,
it's interesting when you're in the moment and you're asking the questions, your brain goes a different direction because it's kind of, you go off script a bit. So thanks for honoring us of that.
No problem.
So, we want to get into some of the books you've written, right? You've written, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, there's 4 or 5 books that you've written. I'd like you to share, with the audience some of the books you've written, and maybe inform people how or what kind of content's within them, what type of material they would expect to find, that kind of thing.
I wish I'd written 4 or 5 books. That would be great. I've written 3. There was one in 2003. This was my first entrance, and I'm going to give you a little preamble on that. This book was called The Vintage Hockey Wax Pack Collector's Guide. So a friend, Roger Kuna, who's actually the co-author of this one, he wrote into the Canadian Sports Magazine. He asked a question about, what year is this wrapper, 67 or 65? We actually had a hard time prior to 1990 to 2000, I guess, 98. What was the year of those wrappers? And they're not dated, and nobody knew at that time. It's incredulous to think that we didn't know what a 67 or 65 wrapper was 20 years ago. The difference, and nobody really knew, and nobody had any evidence. Eventually, we found out, obviously. So we said, let's do something that can rectify those things. And so what we did is we put a 42-page book together, and we would just put all the different, what the card is, what the wrapper is, what the pack is, and what's in the set, how many the set count is, a little bit of a variety up. It was very basic, very simple, but it helped the hobby a lot at that time. And that's 2003. So that was the first book that I came out with. As simple as it is, it gives you the basic outline of what the hobby is and where it goes. Mark Murphy did a book in 96, I think very similar to this in all the sports, but he missed a lot of stuff because I'm very hockey centric with the collectibles. So I was very keen to make sure that we knew all the different years. And actually, we finally decided that 65 and 67 were the correct years and the correct wrappers in that way. So, and then I guess I have to lead in with in 2006, my second book came out. But after this book came out, I never stopped. I was always documenting the food issue along the way, but it was sort of a sidecar thing. I just kept going. And I said, okay, well, what about this? What about this? What are this? A million questions and, so few answers. So I keep on digging and digging. And then all of a sudden, it just, like I said, osmosis before, it just turns into that. You just kind of want to know everything. And because it's a great hobby, it's so much fun. And just knowing the information is basically, for me, it's more than the collectible itself. To be honest, it goes beyond the collectible. Once you start, the best thing I can look forward to is an ad I haven't seen of something that actually helps document that date and gives me a little bit more information. I love that part of it. Do I need to own the item? No, at that point I don't, because the information overrides the actual item itself to me, and that's I guess where I separate from the collector. I am still a collector, but having the information is actually more important than it is owning the item at this point in my life. I'd rather find a new piece of information than I'd rather find a new item. And that's a hard call, but I have to say that is first and foremost in my mind.
Do you find now that you've written these books that it's harder and harder to come by newer pieces of information, or has it opened up a world where people are more willing to contribute to you, saying, "Hey, I know such and such and such and such." Well,
Yeah,
how have you found?
it's a little bit of both because people will give you new information, and there's nothing. There's no landslide information that you really come across. It's little bits and pieces, and you put it all together. So I look forward to just finding a little piece of the puzzle and put it in its place and look for the next piece and keep going on from there. And I'm just trying to, because I'm going from 1910 to 1990, and we're talking about all cards, all food issue, all merchandise. And I have it all documented in my computer. So anytime I find something, I throw it in a file that I've allocated for it. Or if I haven't allocated anything for it, I have this oddball file in each year, 1910, 20, 30, 40. And I put it in there, and then I'll come back to it later. So if I find another piece, then I kind of look through that file and go, okay, that goes with that. Okay, all right. So then we can make a file for it, and then I can start documenting it from there. So
it's a bit like forensic accounting or forensic investigation, like from
very much so. Yeah.
It's interesting because I work in advertising tech, and I work with a lot of what we call UX or user experience architects, and what their job is to do is basically what is the user experience or customer journey across an experience, for example, shopping, online shopping, and whatnot, and they use these Miro boards. There's an online tool where it's just sticky notes. And they draw parallels, right? But they're like, oh, this goes with this. This goes with this.
Yes.
And I'm thinking for someone like you, that actually might be quite helpful because it's a tool where you can just throw something like this is here, this is here. Oh, I need to look at this. Here's a check mark. Oh, this has been solved, and then they rearrange this map so then it becomes an ordered map at the bottom. But it's evergreen. Yeah,
I think that goes on in my head, so I don't need to do with that what your thing does. Because one little thing just sparks something, and it just comes, and I know it, because you've been doing it so long. It's easy for those things. Your synapses just goes bang. Oh, that's related to that. It's so much easier. But I love the structure of that. I think that's a really important, to putting everything together. And it's not like I'm, it's not like one of those murder mysteries where they're trying to piece all the puzzles together. It's actually very streamlined and pretty simple. This issue at this time, we have this advertisement, we have this year, we have this, and it's easy to put together because I can keep all of that information in my head. I think I'm losing more as I'm getting older. I think my processor's kind of, anyways. I guess it's that question. What is it? He's forgotten more than you know. It's almost coming to that point. It's like you can only hold so much in your brain. So sometimes I have to peek inside my own book to find. What was that year again? Oh yeah, it was 1932. Okay, yeah, that's right. So you do have to have a reminder every once in a while because you can only hold so much information. Some people are great. You have those Rain Mans out there that are phenomenal, and I'm not one of those. But I'm relatively pretty good at doing what I do. So.
That's awesome. And again, bit off script, but I have an appreciation for the psychology of the person that's doing the work. So that's one of my jobs as a project manager is to get people to work together. So I really have to spend time understanding that person to make sure I give them what they need so they can work with the team. So it's interesting because I'm seeing parallels in what you're saying. It's a neat dichotomy. We'll probably save that for another show because I think that we could probably go down the psychosocial aspect of what you're doing pretty easily, but we'll save that for another show.
I can sum it up really quickly. Is I ask the right questions to the right people when they're in front of me and they oh, my dad worked. Okay, let's talk a little bit about this. Any answers? Boom. Otherwise, it's just superfluous information at that point. But I try to take in as much as I can. And as soon as I'm focused on an issue, I'm pretty detailed. I can get right into it and actually put the blinders on and just nothing else matters at that point.
Awesome. So I was going to say hi to Sanders and to Orr. Thanks for joining. He says, hey, guys, I see you have the Master on this evening. I have Bobby's second and third books and look at them weekly, the true Bible of hockey. I have mine right there. It's on a stand. It's a bit too far. I should put another camera on it. Yep, I have that one there. So before I go, sorry, go ahead, Bobby.
No, we're just moving on. If we want to, that was the first book, so we can move into quickly the second book. So I didn't really stop. So I said, why don't I put something together? Roger has, a full-time job and what have you. He was busy, and I just said, I'm doing most of it. I'll take care of it. And and I put the second book together because I just said, I said the F word. I won't say it here. Sometimes you just have to say, I'm going to do another book. F it.
Yeah.
And from that, I never stopped. I just said, I'm doing it. And I'm not the type of person that generally do that, but I did it this time because I said, I'm tired of seeing misinformation. I'm tired of seeing listings wrong. I'm tired of seeing auction sites have the wrong. I'm tired of seeing I'm tired of seeing all these companies running the roost, our roost. This is our hobby, not theirs. They're third parties. I want to help us. We are the collectors. So that was the most important thing to me. And this was the main premise of this book. Now, this book has everything from 1910 to 1990 as my other, the other 2015 you have behind you. But this one was more of it was a bigger book. It was more based on dividing everything out, the cards, the display boxes, everything, advertising pieces and what have you. It was really important to put all that in there in large picture form, but actually there was only small writing. And I do call it the Playboy edition because lots of pictures, little writing. And we'll meld into the next book where it was mostly like lists because those needed correcting. They really did. They were long overdue. And I won't take anything away from any of the other price guides. It's this: they never had a historian with passion on their, on their payroll, and I'm on my own payroll. So there's always a different motivation when somebody's doing something for themselves opposed to doing something for somebody else. And I'm a digger, so I used to drive down to the Rare Book Library. It's called the Fisher Library. It was at Eglinton and Bloor and University. I lived at Scarborough Town Center, so I finished at noon, and I would go downtown from noon. I only had till 4:30. You'd have to go down, request books, and then it would take half an hour for them to come to you. I'd look through every magazine, every Canadian magazine, looking for advertisements, and it cost me $20 to park. And then I'd have to go home in rush hour traffic. So I got about 2 hours of advertising research every day. And I did that for about 6 months, about 3 times a day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it costs a lot of money. But passion, it's hard to turn down the passion.
Yeah, I was going to say, it must have been pretty satisfying for you, though, regardless of the money.
It's the days that you didn't find anything. You're just sitting there going,
yeah.
Okay, I'm coming down earlier tomorrow. I'm going to go avoid the traffic and try to get down there a little faster so I can get a little bit more in. And it's the pursuit of trying to find that next piece of information so you can help people. It was a satisfaction for me, but I knew that I was helping people on top of that. I think that's an added bonus to this. I can do it for me and write my own books and not sell them, or just keep all that information to myself, or I can give it back out to the people. So if I help the people, it helps the hobby, it helps support the hobby, it helps keep the hobby healthy, and everybody's that much better for it. And then people say, hey, I didn't realize, oh, that's what it is. I'm going to collect that. And that's great. You got another collector for the hobby.
And passion has no price tag. So let's be clear on that one, right? So
yes.
I mean, for example, people blow thousands of dollars on wax. It's not like they're going to get that back, so they still do it.
True.
So I'm going to turn it over to. Sorry, did you have another book to? I think there was just 3, right?
Yeah, there is the third one, which I did mention that it was mostly, lists and what have you, with smaller pictures. A lot of people said they liked this book with the bigger pictures better than this book. But this book had the details. This book had the viewing pleasure. That's why I called one the Playboy, and I called the other one the, I don't even know what I call it. It's just called the VHC. So there we go.
So I'm going to let Kent take over some questions because
Sure.
I've been talking a lot and you've been very generous with answering your questions. So go ahead, Kent.
So, Bobby, when you're trying to locate pictures for the one book, how difficult did you find to try and locate vintage pictures of the items you were talking about?
Well, I think the best thing I did early on was I learned to save pictures from eBay and all auction houses. So I was very, I pursued that very passionately. where I would go in and go, oh, there's a nice picture. Okay, I'll keep that. I dump it in the file, and after you dump it in the file, then you can put some semblance behind a set, and then kind of put those pictures in. Unfortunately, when we had the late 90s, early 2000s, we had those webcams, and those pictures were like, the resolution was so low, it didn't even matter. You put it in a book, it's almost blurry at that point.
Yeah.
So, I would have to ask and email people, can you send me a picture if you have that? And so I went through a lot of that in the early on. As we got into 2008, after about that time period, we got into better resolution cameras, better resolution phones, obviously. And now we're at the pinnacle. So, even the worst eBay picture is still a great picture. It's still better than 2000 of eBay, right? So.
For sure. And what was the response like when you reached out to people for a picture? How did they respond back to you?
Very generously. I've been always free to share my information with them. So everybody's been always free to share with me. And they're actually excited to tell me something that maybe I don't know. And that's, that's pleasure for people in this hobby. Hey, Bobby doesn't even know that. Wow. Hey, I'm helping him out. Great. His books help me out. I'm helping him out. And that satisfaction. And because we give back and forth freely and easily, without it's not like you make money doing books. I'll tell you, the financial burden behind them is more than you receive in money value, but you receive different value for doing the books. It's more personal satisfaction and knowing that you helped other people by providing a proper service and a correct service, because I'm very hard on myself. Like I said,
sure,
the glass is empty. It's never half full with me. It's always empty, and we work up from there. And if I work that way for the rest of the hobby until I finish doing the hobby, I think we'll have a better hobby information-wise going forward.
Now, so about your books, can you let our audience know, are your books still available for purchase, or what's going on with that?
Well, this one I still have maybe 6 or 8 copies left, and that's basically it. The other ones are very difficult to find. We printed only 1,000 of these back in 2003. We printed 2,000 of the last two. I printed, sorry. So this one's a very difficult one to find. I think they're about $130 now, when I was selling them for $50 way back when. And actually, even after a few years after they were out, I started charging $25 or $35 each. And everyone goes, I want that price. And you can't get that price anymore, because someone will sell their collection, but they won't sell their book, because they can keep their collection right here, right?
Right.
Yeah, so I don't find the books coming up for resale very often at all.
And there's no plans for like a second or third print?
Ken, when you're self-published, this is all self-published, so all the design and everything was on me. All the money that I had to spend on the books, the $40,000, the $35,000 that you had to spend on making these books is out of my pocket. I did have some relief with advertising, because this one, advertising was tough for this one, because I was coming from this world of, he's the vintage hockey wax pack collectors guy. He's not Bobby Burrell, the whatever. But once this book started getting around, there, hey, this guy's all right. This is good. And so it was hard getting advertising. This one, I had to turn people away.
Oh, okay.
And because I don't want it to be too much advertising. I put advertising in between the decades, and I left it at that. I thought it was fair and equitable to everybody. And people say, hey, listen, just give me a small spot. There's no small spots left. I'm not splitting halfway through just to get advertising in there. I said I've recouped enough, and I'm going to keep the book cheap. And everybody got it at $25. It's $70 now, if you can find it.
It'd be interesting if you had basically a section for modern company to try and do vintage style advertising, just to see if they could pull it off. Because from an advertising perspective, those old school advertisements are not easy. People thought they're easy to pull. They're very hard to pull off. So
they are. They were good too.
Yes.
Very well done.
Yes.
It's definitely a different world, and I really appreciate the old style advertising. I really like that simplistic
Yeah.
artwork. The quality of artwork that went into some of the old ads is phenomenal, and the new stuff is all CAD or done with modern computer systems, and it just doesn't match in a certain way. Not that it isn't better or worse. I'm just saying it just doesn't match. It's not the same. So when you look at a vintage ad and you see it, and you go, hey, it's great. That's a beautiful looking piece of art. And then you look at something modern, it's just like old cards and new cards. As simplistic as they are, they're beautiful in a sense. Whereas new cards are beautiful, but it's computer generated.
Right.
So there is a difference between there. There's a fine difference, but any which way, a difference regardless.
The technology back then versus now is two different worlds. So because I work in the advertising world, I'm familiar with advertising and print and the print process. So there's the print process modern day, which is lengthy. And I was told by a fellow who started advertising, visual arts advertising earlier on in the late 50s, 60s. And he actually explained to me the process. So coming up with the process for a print ad, you would go through weeks and weeks and weeks and paper after paper after paper, and you're hand drawing these. Like it's crazy. Sorry, Ken, go ahead.
It's okay. It kind of leads me into my next question, Bobby.
Sure.
So we understand you're developing an app and an ebook. Can you tell us a little bit about the app and why you've decided to go away from print this time around?
Print is very time consuming and very expensive. I wish I could do print. It's just we're 2021, Kent, and it's just so hard with the internet age and mass media that you have to go that way. And the best part about that is I can update on the fly. If any errors or there's any price changes, I can change it on the fly. So what's coming now is a culmination of all three books plus my computer. So if you add these three books and what's in my computer, which is another book and a half size, or actually another 3 books plus of information that I'm going to be adding to the website and app. The app's going to be great for searching if you're out on the field and you want to go, hey, what is that thing? I don't know. Or what is the price of that? You can just type it in. You can have your list saves. Everything is accessible. It's a great app written by Andy Malecki, who does the CFL books. He's a code writer, so he's done it all himself, and he's very detailed. I thought I was. He is so much more detail oriented. The problem is that you get too far into that age, you're not open-minded enough, and I'm kind of balanced between the two. So I'm always trying to, find the happy medium in it, and we're good for each other that way. And I think what's coming is going to be an amazing information source for everybody. Even for people who collect other sports, because a lot of multi-sport issues are going to be in there that most people didn't even realize that they were multi-sport. Because we always think of hockey and we forget about the multi-sports. Although I do list them in these books, there's actually so much more. And there's a lot of regional stuff and a lot of stuff issued by Richard or Hull or Belleville or whoever, whatever the player is. Those will be eventually added to there. So when you do your search and you go, I want to see all the Bobby Hull cards. Well, all the cards will come up, all his merchandise and all his food issue will come up. So you'll have a list to go through and you go, oh, there it is right there. I wish I could show you, but I think we need a couple more months to really go through a demo on that. So
we'll have you back for that. So there's another episode in the making.
We're good.
Go ahead, Ken.
So thanks. It's understood that with research, it's time-consuming and often tedious journey. What stuck out to you as the most frustrating portions of that?
Research is really interesting. I think I told you about going downtown, but the other research, it comes in dribs and drabs. Okay. And like I said, I have that file I can dump everything in. So when I find some key information and I can finally document something, I can make a file for it. I have this oddball section in each year that I dump stuff in that you can't really put anything to it. And then every once in a while, you find some key information for that. Then you can make a file for it and say, okay, that's 1974-5, and that was issued through this, and then you can add to it, which is great for me. And then that's one less thing in the oddball file. But there's a lot of great oddball stuff that is out there. So it's just a matter of the problem with that. You just want to add more information. It's very frustrating when you can't go any further and your resources, old newspapers, talking to collectors, you hit a wall and you just really have to sit there and go, okay, move on. It's so hard to move on because you're almost there. You're almost at that precipice of the next best issue that you can document, and you just need that key information. You can't find it. And that's the frustrating part. But there's so many between 1910 and 1990 that I can move on to something else.
Wow.
So let's segue a bit.
Sure.
And we kind of touched on this earlier, but I'm going to bring it back. So we seem to find commonalities in what we do for work and what we do for fun. I've often wondered if you prefer games of strategy or whodunit types, or what type of game is down your alley that's a parallel with the type of research that you do. And if it's not those games, what games do you like? It'd be interesting. I want to just understand the psychology of you as a person and if there's parallels there.
Sure, that's great. Growing up, I didn't read too many books. I'm English 55, math 90, that kind of guy. But I did read a group of books, and it was called Encyclopedia Brown. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it was.
I used to wear that all the time. I used to read them all the time when I was a kid.
Yeah.
So I love those books. I remember the stories even today, and I just love those books. As I got a little bit older, I got into Clive Cussler, which was sort of adventure, but he was also looking for treasures and different ways of doing things. So I've always been that inquiring mind about things. So I'd have to say that, with that, I've always had that sense of wonderment about what's missing in my life with regards to the things I can't find. Oh, what's that? Oh my gosh, no way. Kent, how dare you?
So Kent, just quickly for Kent and Bobby, please explain to the crowd, what are you looking at?
This?
Yes, what is this?
This is one of the Encyclopedia Brown books that Bobby was talking about. So it's an adventure story, and basically you read the book, and then you kind of get to the trying to solve the mystery.
Interesting. So, Bobby, there is a parallel then. That's very interesting that I find that. I'm very happy to see that because it shows that, your passion it's not just for one thing. It's kind of the mindset, right? So your passion is a part of it, but you have a mindset of how you approach things. And I often ask these questions, and I haven't done it on the show, and I'm regretting not doing it to some earlier people that we had on the show, but I want to do it moving forward. So I really want to understand the psychology of the person and what do they do, right? So I'll give you a good example. When we talked to Paul Janis, the visual artist, we ask him how does he approach his work? And he was very detailed and methodical on how he approached his work. And you can see that in his work, right? So you're like, oh, well, I've done this, I did this. You can see that. So I want to ask that more often. That's interesting that you are that type of person. So it's good to hear that as well. I would never want to play a game of strategy against you. I'm sure I would lose.
No. I understand your question perfectly. And looking back, after you asked that question, Encyclopedia Brown, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Clive Cussler makes sense. It all makes sense. I didn't enjoy reading for English. I hated Shakespeare. I hated all that other stuff. I always liked something with a little bit of mystery, a little bit of twist. Don't lead me down the garden path. I want to go off on a trail by myself and do something else. And that's what helps me be, a questionable archivist or historian. It makes me question more and more what's going on behind the scenes and what more information I can find, how many more people I can talk to. I can be stuck in a room for 3 days by myself and be quite happy. But when I'm out there in the hobby, I love being with people and love finding and talking, because it always is a key information that you'll find from that one guy that you're just kind of sitting there talking to you. Oh yeah, my dad worked at this place and that. Oh, hey, whoa. All right, let's talk. And then we start talking a little bit, and he goes, "Oh yeah, this, yeah. My dad's still alive. He's got some of this stuff at home, or maybe you can talk to him." And that's happened quite a few times over the years, and a lot with the old OPG employees too. They told me a lot of great information that actually I passed on, because I'm the sponge, and I just filter it through me, and I can give it back to the collectors in that way.
Awesome. So what other, so going back to your historian ways, and pardon me, that's a label I've applied to you. If you like it or not, please let me know. Because,
I could go with that, sure. Why
okay, we'll go with a vintage historian. What other historians of the hobby are you aware of and that you follow and converse with?
I kind of wrote that down. I'm going to have a quick look at my paper here because I do want to give people some due.
Sure.
I know there's well, you have to take into account Andy Malecki, who did the vintage hockey, vintage football CFL books.
Right.
You know, we've always conversed with each other and shared information and shared theories on certain things, because a lot of things are relevant to CFL as they are Canadian, because they're Canadian, and a lot of things are listed kind of together, so we can always put those things together. I was good at the early stuff with him. I helped him out a lot with that part of it. I'm just trying to find where that question was. Which question was it? 47 or just kidding.
In there.
Oh, historians. Okay. You know, there's other book writers that I would contact. There was Jefferson Burdick. He's the author of everything, the ACC, the American Card Catalog. He documented everything. So there was a little bit of guidance there early on with Jefferson Burdick. There was other people who wrote books. Jeff Shepard, who wrote the Topps Bazooka book. There's Dave Hornish. He does a website on non-sports, and he always asks me a lot of questions about hockey, and we see the parallels between the two. There's been many collectors over the years that I associate with who do similar stuff in different venues, away from, you know, maybe non-sports or other sports, and we kind of talk a little bit on occasion, and we share what we can. And I think that furthers the hobby so much better. So they can always come to me if they have a hockey question or a Topps question or a Peachy question. I'm better with the Peachy than Topps, but, you know, at least we can share that information and get a better understanding. And going forward, it just helps everybody in general. So those are my major historian influences. There's quite a few other you know, I have to get back to the collectors, because they're the people who really helped me. Just by sharing information, just by talking to people at shows. And I think you find out more information from the collectors than you do from anybody else.
Interesting. I want to, after the show, Bobby, maybe you can give me a list of those individuals. I'd like to research a bit about them
Sure.
that you mentioned. I think I'll find that very interesting to read on.
Yeah. Sure,
so you mentioned that you converse with them. That's really neat to hear, that there's a small circle. I'm sure the membership of the historian club of this type of content is small.
It's kind of funny that you say that, because when anybody contacts you, you're almost flattered to a degree, because you're going, hey, this guy does that. He's contacting me. I feel kind of special in a way. And you just help them whichever way you can. And I think they feel the same way back and forth. You know, we're not so famous or anything like that anybody cares. It's just that, hey, yeah, we're reaching out and just helping each other.
Awesome. So, okay, so I want to take this a little bit further. So
Sure.
You have your it's almost like the X-Men. You have your little group, right? The vintage X-Men. Who would you consider is your mentor and has helped you along your journey to this date?
I had a mentor written down here. I'm very sure of that. There's actually quite a few. I would have to say my mentor. There's some guys who were in the hobby early on. Ronald Villeneuve, if you know of him. I don't know. See, you guys might not know him. These were the guys whose parents owned a variety store, and then they got into the hobby in the 80s. And those are sort of my mentors. A lot of those guys who came in early, they have the early stories of the hobby, where it's evolved, what happened, what was bought, what was sold, what was discovered. Those guys are really key to the hobby going forward from at least 70, somewhere around that time period up. If you can find anybody earlier than that, good luck. But you know, once the hobby sort of started, more information started to trade hands, and those early guys are sort of my mentors. I would have to say. not that they're mentors, because I've certainly surpassed them in the information, but them sharing it all to me was phenomenal. I can't complain that those guys don't know enough, because they know more than most people. Anybody who's been around since at least the late 80s or early 90s knows so much more. Anybody with 30 years in the hobby, it certainly has my respect, because they've seen a lot of different things happen.
Awesome. So, okay, so take this a little bit step further in terms of your documentation, right? Sorry, documentation of history of vintage collectibles.
Mm-hmm.
Would you ever want to go beyond hockey and document something else, another sport or non-sport or whatever may have you? Have you ever thought about it?
Oh, sure. While I've been doing the hockey, there's always been a sidebar of non-sports, Parker's mainly, but a lot of pre-war chocolate companies, gum companies, all the early issues. So I'm pretty well versed in the vintage non-sports, Canadian non-sports mostly. That's where my second passion lies. When you start researching companies like William Patterson or Willard Chocolate or what have you, you start looking into the company, and then you look at the baseball issues or the boxing stuff they did, and then you start looking at those sets and you start documenting that just as a sidebar kind of thing away from the hockey. And then before you know it, you start ending up knowing more about the company than you probably thought you wanted to know. And you get into the hobby and then the companies, and then you get into their history, and then you start looking back at when they started, and then you become a historian because you're just researching that company for no apparent reason, because the set's been documented. Why do you have to know about the company? Because it's a very interesting story, because there's a lot of things related to chocolate. And we went from tobacco in the 10s, we went to the 20s to chocolate, and then the 30s we went from gum straight forward from there. And there's a lot of things related in there, and especially with Parker, related to, I think, sheriff coins, all the licensing issues. There's a lot of stuff going on in that area that needs to be written about.
I'd like to interview you for the chocolate aspect of your history. Documenting the history. So that might be. I think we can't be by identify 2 or 3 different topics we could do with Bobby over the next little while.
Absolutely, for sure.
That would be interesting. Yep. It's also interesting that I got so enthralled with Bobby talking, I took your questions, Kent. So I'm apologizing for you.
Oh, nice, eh?
All good. It's part of the live show theme. There is no script.
True. So I have a couple of questions, Kent, and I'll go back to our regular
go for it.
order.
Go ahead.
So that's interesting that you talk about the chocolate aspect of it, and I definitely want to talk to you more about that, like I mentioned before. So what element of vintage hockey collectibles has not been covered enough to your liking?
I think the merchandise, stuff that was sold in a souvenir stand, or was sold in a Sears or Eaton's, or even let's just say where you sharpen your skates, those little places. They always had something hanging up that was promotional, but you never kind of, it was a few guys ordered it, not too many people. So those things have really lacked in the documentation process. I've actually documented a lot of that, but you're limited on your information. There's no advertisement for it. It's just, it's out there. So finding anything related to that is very exciting for me.
Awesome. So actually, make sure to go back to my list of questions here. And I think I did touch on this really quickly. You already documented and discussed on this show that you do talk to historians of other collectibles, right? So you mentioned that there's a few people you've talked to, so we can skip over that one. Mm-hmm. Kent, I finally caught up. It's all yours, buddy.
Bobby, what period of time would you want to go back and visit if you possibly could do that?
I think we all want to go back to our childhood. I would go back to 1970, but I think the real time I would like to go back to is 1920.
And why is that?
A very interesting time for chocolate companies, them putting things in the chocolate bars. And it wasn't just hockey. There's a lot of non-sports that were in chocolate bars. And so I found it to be a very interesting time prior to the gum era. Gum was kind of gum, but the chocolate, they started it all. The tobacco, they were doing tobacco, turn of the century, butterfly cards, all these cards. Just hockey or baseball was just another subject. With chocolate bars, very specific. Never prior, never really too much after, but the 20s, very focus point.
No, what makes you think that these chocolate companies decided to do that at that during that era?
I think it's progression. Tobacco didn't really sell to kids, so what was the next best thing for kids? And most companies, they usually had about 30 to 40 chocolate bars on the shelves at any given time. So Cadbury, Cow and chocolate, whatever. And they were doing it prior to that too, but not too much. 20s was really a focus time. It just seemed like it was, I think a lot of companies copied other companies. Hey, they're putting in, hey, why don't we do something too? And I think everybody copied everybody from then on. Yeah, I think that's what really happened. And, it's like the gum. In 1933, 5 companies come up with gum carts. How does that work? They all had the epiphany at 1933. No, it was a great salesman selling cardboard or a great printing salesman. And that's who came to, hey, your competition, we're putting hockey cards. Hey, why don't you guys? Oh yeah, we'll do a different. Okay, and we'll do an O-Pee-Chee. And they all did it at the same time in 1933. Not 32, not 34, 33. Amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, I find the whole history about that fascinating because you have all these chocolate companies that came and went, and they may have had a couple issues here and there, and then they were gone.
Yeah.
So it's like it's so hard to keep track of what was out there back in the day. But you're doing a good job of it, though, I would say.
Keeping on top of it, trying to.
So
it's hard delving back into the 20s because there's not much advertisement. There's very little, there's not much information you can ask somebody's grandfather because they'd have to be 120 at this point, right? So, anyways, yeah.
So the vast amount of knowledge you've accumulated throughout your journey so far, would you ever consider making a documentary on the history of the hobby?
I'd love to help somebody do that, yes. I don't think I'd do it myself, but I'd love to help somebody do it who could structure it, and I could add the pieces. I don't think it's something that I would do. I don't think my talents really revolve around that, but I can help anybody.
Sure about that? I don't know.
You can only focus on so much. You only have so much time. You have a lot of talents in certain areas, but you know where you're licked, and when somebody's better than you at other things. Let them do them. I'm good at what I do. Let those guys with the television or the cameras and the editing and all that other stuff do that. But I'm there to help. I'm there to help every step of the way. And to be maybe a sure, I can do that. Yeah, but not to be the main guy. No, not at all.
Fair enough. So we're in this period now that some people would argue is probably like the hot period of the hobby.
Yeah.
What are 3 key items you document as part of this portion of the hobby history compared to the last boom era?
Oh, I kind of wrote that down. It was kind of interesting. I would have to say that, price guides started right around that boom time. Beckett came in, there was all SCG, all these other price guides really started to come in at that time. And I find that in this time, we had a lot of companies starting. We had a lot of blogs starting. We have Card Ladder. You have Chris and Christine. They're kind of going forward with documenting everything in a detailed sense like I do with my stuff. And I really give them a lot of credit because that's a lot of work. But they're doing it. And I like that. I like that people are really taking the bull by the horns and going forward with this in a detailed sense. And they're on point. Back then, price guides were loose. Checklists were loose. There was really nobody historically researching them. They just kind of we stole information or plagiarized information from Jefferson Burdick, ACC, and then all the other price guides along the way. And we got to that certain point in 1991 where these guys are going forward and they're trying to document as much as possible. And I think it's really good that they've done that. And then you sort of have the investors of that time period was very different. I'd have to say that the investors were coming in. They were trying to put $5-10 into a card to maybe make 50 or 100. Now it's $50 or $500 to make possibly a house or a car or and that's the difference. It's the difference is that it's about the same, but the dollar value has went 1,000 times. So the comparison is there. We're both trying to do the same, but the dollar difference is vastly different. So that's why a lot of people got into the investor kind of phase that we sort of have went through, and we're still going through, where people are realizing that there's money in cards. We just need more sense of a collecting point, opposed to just the investor point.
Sure. Yeah.
And the last one I had, dealers. I found that the dealers back then, it started a lot of dealers doing stuff. They were young guys, and we're still in the hobby, or have been in the hobby for 30, 40 years. A lot of dealers started in 1991, but in today's world, everybody became a dealer. Everybody became a buyer, a seller, and we almost lost the sense of dealer, because now we have more trades going on at shows than we do have almost deals on the table. Everyone's rocking around with their briefcases going, hey, how about trading here? How about doing this? So I'm seeing a lot of what was new back then is a very new now, where we went from people coming into the hobby, trying to make a hobby. These people are coming in, making the hobby that much bigger, more investing, more, everything's 10 times. So we have blogs, and the promotional part of it is gone crazy. Back then they were advertising, you guys know, with the old advertising we were talking about, Amit, Upper Deck was you could buy those magazines and every second page was an advertisement. Today, every blog is out there promoting the hobby. So it's very similar, but in a multiple times at this point, right? So.
The interesting segue there is, and again, this is bit history lesson, bit how people approach things in general, right? Yeah. So the average attention span, and this is just changes a lot, right? So online, to grab someone's attention, you have probably 3 to 4 seconds, right?
Oh yeah.
In today's world, sure. Yeah.
Back then, it was a lot longer. It was in a magazine or it was on a wall, and you could soak it in more, right? So it was more affordance for the art and beauty of the advertisement. Now,
no internet.
Right. Now it's like, what gets your attention? For example, on YouTube, if you put the word rant, you'll get eyeballs, right? So it's all about what can you get within in an non-infinite amount of time.
That's right. Yeah.
And it's getting faster and faster, that you'll see the advertising is relative to that methodology, right?
Exactly.
Less art, more. That's what can I get in your eyeball.
True.
Yeah.
True. Yeah.
So I had thought of this question. I'm gonna ask you again this question here. So if you were given a time capsule, and I told you to put 5 collectibles in it, what 5 items would you choose?
Yeah, that was a great question. I really like that one. It bothered me too, because you can only pick 5, but it took me a while to get to 3. So I was kind of going, only 5. But here's how I did it in this order. I don't know if we want to be selfish or hobby or whatever, but this is how I did it. I would put my family photo album in that capsule. The one thing about my family is they've allotted me the time to do this. Although they've sacrificed, they have sacrificed my time with them, because I've done so much with the hobby and books and all the constant research. They've sacrificed through that. But we always try to help our kids, or try to, help our wife, or make them feel good. They make me feel good by allowing me to do what I do, and which makes me feel good because I can help other people too. And I think they understand it. So, it's a big shout out goes to that. And that's why the family photo album is really first, because they allowed me this time to do that for everybody and myself. And men, we always want a sense of accomplishment in our life, and I've really gotten appreciation for that from them.
Awesome.
So, the second one is the Canadian flag. I'm very much of a patriotic person. I really like Canada. I love being Canadian. I love hockey. Hockey is Canada. So that was my second one. My other one would be the only thing that really truly survived my childhood was my SO Power Play album from 1970.
Oh, I remember that.
My dad, me and my brother were sitting in the back seat, and it was 1970, and he just threw two of these back there with a couple packets, and we just went, wow, and then we put them together. So this is the survivor. She's not in the greatest of shape, but she's the sole survivor of my. We moved a lot, like I said, so Mom would just go, do you guys need that anymore? And no, we're older now. We don't need that kid stuff, you know, and she'd throw a lot of stuff. So over the years, that's really one of the true only survivors that I have from my childhood. The other thing was, obviously, I would leave these three.
Yeah, for sure.
And because they are hard to find, right? The first one was a flash drive with all the videos that I taped at the expo of us opening packs and revealing, and any other videos that I made of other people there too.
Nice.
Just so they can see what happened way back in the early 2000s, you know, with my videotaping. And I haven't shared most of those, but they're coming. But there's some good stuff out there. And yeah, those are the top 5 things that I think I would share. There's probably about 50 others, but those are the key ones for me.
So I asked you that question, and I left that kind of open-ended to see where you would go with it.
Mm-hmm.
I love the fact that you put family number one. That matters to me it matters to me more than anything else you said on your list. Because without family that let us do the things that we do, and for those of you who are not familiar with collecting, it is an all-encompassing, time-consuming, lifelong passion and endeavor that sometimes doesn't amount to anything with a financial gain, but you know, it keeps your butt in a seat and you're not at a bar drinking, right? You're out and about trying to spread the passion on your hobby. So I would say marrying, like my wife has married a collector. I'm sure it's tough. She sees all the stuff in my room.
Me too, yeah.
I love your answer for that respect. I love the other things that you said, and that matters to me a lot. Just before we go to our last part, we made it to an hour, Bobby, and I was worried I wouldn't get all the questions in, but we made it to an hour. Good. So I want to share. Are you okay for a few more minutes?
Sure, no problem.
Yeah. So I want to first, let's get some questions up here. So Sanderson 2 said he'll be our first subscriber of the app. So that's good to hear.
I got one.
There you go. I got 2. I'm here
okay,
too.
2. Kent? Do I have 3 in Kent?
Come on, Kent.
Of course,
3. You know, all I ask, you know, a lot of people are saying, I'm going to join your thing and support you. And I said, just because I support you on other things, I said, I don't want you to join the site because I know you're not into hockey, and that's fine. But the support I need from you is to refer. Say, hey, Bobby's got this great site. Why don't you check it out? That's all I ask. I don't want you to join if you don't want to. I wouldn't join a baseball group because it wouldn't serve my purpose. Yeah. But if my friend Kent had one going, hey, this guy Kent, he's got a great web. You got to check it out. That's how, and that's all I'm asking. That's all I'm asking. Sure. Is that you support me that way. I don't expect financial support from people who really aren't into that end of the hobby or hockey, for that matter.
So we have David G, who's checked us out for the first time. I think first time, or maybe the first time you're commenting. Who knows? He has a question. Speaking of Candy Company pre-war cards, how was Bobby able to locate a photo of the very rare Sprague Cleghorn Maple Crispet card for his book? It is nowhere to be found online.
You know, everyone talks about the Bert Corbeau, and actually the Sprague Cleghorn is probably the rarest of them all. It just doesn't get the press. And I'm going to refer, without saying who it was, I'm just going to refer to one of my mentors. That's all.
Cool. And there's another question here. I'm not really sure.
Johnny Bauer bobblehead.
Oh my gosh, yeah. That there's a blinker bobblehead. We don't really know where it's from. They're very rare. There's only 2. known, and it's a goalie, and it's number one, and it's Bauer, and he's got this big head. Very difficult to find. I think the last, what was it, Detroit or Boston, went for $23,000. It's just phenomenal. So finding one of those is actually one of the key things I'm looking forward to.
Bobby, back then, what were the bobbleheads made out of?
People call them chalkware or paper mache kind of thing. They were kind of ceramic-ish.
So they were pretty fragile then.
Very much, yeah. So the survival rate is very difficult. Yeah.
So we're at the close of the show. I wanted to.
I'm going to stop you for one second. We forgot one comment from a Facebook user, which I think is actually Scott, by the way.
Oh, it's actually Caitlin.
Oh, Caitlin? Same store.
This one here. I believe I looked it up while Bobby was talking.
Oh, okay.
I looked up. It was Caitlin Chamberlain, who works with Scott at the sports stop in Blenheim Stadium Sports Card. So she uses one of your books all the time.
Oh, great. Wonderful. Thank you.
And she's a young mother. So she's someone who's younger than our age group who's using that book. So there you go, Bobby. There's all demographics using your book.
Hang on. Sorry, Sanderson Orr said, let me put it up. I'm talking about the one he owns.
Oh, yeah. I have a couple of regular ones. They're out there. The 62s. Yeah, I own those ones. But the rare, when you talk about the Bauer bobblehead, that's the key one. I don't own that one. I don't have the resources to really spend the money on that. That is one thing I would spend the money on if I had it.
There you go.
But 15 grand is a tough go. I can do a few things, but I don't know. I mentioned my family, didn't I?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, that's that. Yeah, we're kind of at that end point. It's like, okay, my wife will say. That's it.
So we're going to show a cool piece of artwork. It's very much in tune with vintage advertising style. So I'm going to end the show with that. And as I end it, Bobby, we get to ask you the question we ask all our guests. And it's my favorite question. Although I have to say your answer to the time capsule may rival this question, but let's just go with it.
Okay.
So as I showed a picture, tell us what inspires you.
See, I kind of wrote that one too because it's a two-parter. I think the two parts is to find the next clue, to find the next piece of the puzzle, to find the next thing that I can unveil to the public. It's not just about me. It's if you have a yacht and you can't let anybody sail on it, how good is that yacht? Mm-hmm. You have to share it with your friends. And that's the point that inspires me to go further, is that I'm not doing this for me and personal satisfaction. I'm doing it to help the collector. The notoriety, I kind of already sort of have that. I don't, I'm not wanting any of that. I'm doing that. So, hey guys, look what I found. 1963. I knew, here it is. And they go, wow, that's great. And that's the fun part of the hobby, is the wow factor. And the second part is the same old for me, is who doesn't want to wake up to a treasure hunt every morning?
Good answer. Good answer.
Yeah, that's a really good answer. So, Bobby, you did. I think you're one of the few guests that has hit the nail on the head with the last two questions in a very elegant fashion. So thank you for that.
Oh, wonderful. Thanks, guys.
So I want to, first of all, we kept Bobby over an hour, and we normally stick to an hour. So I want to thank you for staying this long.
No problem.
Thank you for all of our viewers and people who listen on podcast. Thank you for checking us out. Dennis, I want to say, Dennis, hey, thank you for checking out our show. You come every single show and you contribute
to content.
Thanks, Dennis.
So thanks about that. So Bobby, we're gonna end the show. I want you to hang out, and then we'll just say good night to everyone. So good night, everyone. Happy Tuesday.
Thank you so much.
Happy Tuesday.
Oh, sorry, forgot to mention Blake Jameson on next week. Now, happy Tuesday.
Oh, there we go.